"I'll give you 25 million if you can save this deal," laughed the CEO. But the cleaning lady left him speechless. Richard Hamilton was boiling with anger as he watched coffee dripping over the most important documents of his business career. His tech company was about to close the biggest deal in its history with a German multinational. But now the contract papers were soaked and stained. The woman who had spilled the coffee stood frozen beside his desk, clutching a cleaning rag with trembling hands. Mary Grace Sullivan was 52 and had worked as a cleaner at the company for 15 years, always arriving before everyone else and leaving last. At that moment, her face showed a mix of shame and worry that only fueled the businessman's rage. "You just destroyed 3 months of work," Richard shouted, abruptly rising from his executive chair. "Do you have any idea how much this company will lose because of your incompetence?" Mary lowered her head, feeling tears well up in her eyes. She had woken up at 4 in the morning, as she always did, to arrive early and start cleaning before the employees came in. Nothing like this had ever happened in all her years of dedicated work. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton. It was an accident. I tripped on the computer cord and—" "An accident?" he interrupted with a sarcastic laugh. "You just threw away $25 million. That's the value of the contract you just ruined with your carelessness." The office fell silent. Other employees passing by the hallway slowed their steps, curious about the argument. Mary felt the weight of their stares, the humiliation growing with every passing second. Richard paced around his desk, gesturing wildly. His graying hair was slightly disheveled, and his expensive suit contrasted sharply with Mary's simple uniform. He had a habit of humiliating employees when things went wrong, especially those he considered unimportant. "You know what I'll do," he said, a cruel smile on his lips. "I'll give you a chance to fix this. If you can save this deal and close the contract with the Germans, I'll personally give you $25 million. The offer echoed through the office like a bomb. Mary looked up, confused and stunned. A few employees edged closer to hear better. "Excuse me, sir?" "You heard me. 25 million if you can clean up this mess you made." Richard laughed loudly, amused by his own absurd proposal. "Of course it's impossible, but at least you'll understand the gravity of what you've done." Mary stared at the wet documents on the desk, papers filled with charts, spreadsheets, and contracts she didn't fully understand, but clearly represented something vital to the company where she'd spent the best years of her life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us newcomers grow. Now back to the story. "I accept the challenge, Mr. Hamilton." The mocking smile vanished from the businessman's face. He had expected Mary to leave in tears, apologizing, not to accept an offer he'd made purely to humiliate her further. "Excuse me," he repeated, incredulous. "I said I accept. Give me a chance to fix what I ruined." Mary straightened her shoulders, surprising even herself with her courage. Richard was speechless for a few seconds. Then, regaining his composure, he laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Fine. You've got 3 days. The Germans arrive on Friday for the final meeting. If you haven't found a way to save this deal by then, you're fired, and don't expect any severance." Mary felt a chill in her stomach. She had no idea how she would manage to do something that an entire team of executives had taken months to prepare. But something inside her, perhaps wounded pride or the need to prove her worth, kept her from giving up. "All right, Mr. Hamilton, 3 days." "Great. Now, get out of here and let me think about how to explain to the investors that our janitor is going to try and save the company's biggest contract." He shook his head, still laughing at the absurdity of the situation. Mary left the room with the smudged documents in her hands. In the hallway, she ran into Betty, her co-worker, and only true friend at the company. Betty had witnessed the whole scene and wore a worried expression. "Mary, have you lost your mind? How are you going to pull this off?" "I don't know, Betty, but I can't stand being treated like I'm invisible anymore. I've worked here for 15 years. I know this company better than people who earn 20 times what I do." The two women walked in silence to the break room, where Mary sat down to sort through the papers and figure out exactly what she needed to do. The documents were smeared, but most of the content was still legible. The contract was with a German company called Innotech, specializing in business management systems. They wanted to implement their technology in the United States and had chosen Richard's company as their exclusive partner. The deal involved not just the initial $25 million, but also the possibility of expansion across Latin America. Mary spent the next few hours trying to decipher the technical terms and commercial conditions. There was a lot she didn't understand, but her life experience and sharp observations of how the company operated began to reveal important details. She noticed several inconsistencies in the numbers presented. Operational costs seemed underestimated, and certain expenses weren't being properly accounted for. Mary knew the company's real expenses because she was responsible for buying cleaning supplies and had noticed how administrative costs had risen over the years. That afternoon, she sought out Anthony, the company's most senior accountant. Anthony had always been kind to her, and they occasionally chatted about family and personal life during breaks. "Anthony, I need a favor. Mr. Hamilton gave me a task related to the contract with the Germans. Can you explain some of these numbers to me?" Anthony was surprised by the request but agreed to help. He had known Mary for years and knew she was serious and hard-working. When she explained the situation, he couldn't hide his shock. "Mary, are you sure about this? This is really complex stuff." "I know it is, Anthony, but I have to try. If I fail, at least I'll leave knowing I did everything I could." Anthony spent an hour explaining the basics of commercial contracts and helping Mary understand the structure of the deal. He was impressed by how quickly she absorbed the information and asked relevant questions. "Did you know you have a good head for numbers?" he remarked. "I never really thought about it. When I was young, I wanted to study business, but then I got married, had kids, and life took me in other directions." By the end of the first day, Mary had identified at least 3 major problems in the proposal. The equipment maintenance costs weren't properly accounted for, there was a clause about employee training that could lead to unexpected expenses, and the logistics for distribution to other cities were poorly planned. She went home that night with her mind buzzing with ideas. She lived in a small apartment in Queens, in the eastern part of New York City, with her youngest son, Ryan, who was 23. Her other 2 children had already married and moved out. "Mom, what happened today? You seem different," remarked Ryan, who was studying for his college entrance exams. Mary told her son the whole story, which he listened to with disbelief and then growing admiration. "Mom, I always knew you were smarter than people gave you credit for. Remember when you helped me with math in school? You always found easier ways to solve problems." This conversation gave Mary a bit of the confidence she needed. She spent the night reviewing the documents and taking notes in an old notebook she used for grocery lists. On the second day, she arrived at the company even earlier than usual. She wanted time to research the German firm and the tech market in the United States online. The company had set up computers in the break room for employees to use during their breaks, and Mary decided to take advantage of them. She spent 2 hours reading about Innotech and uncovered valuable information. The German company had failed in an expansion attempt in Mexico 2 years prior, for exactly the same issues Mary had spotted in the US proposal: underestimated operational costs and logistical problems. She also discovered that the general manager of Innotech in the United States was a man named Klaus Schmidt, who highly valued operational efficiency and had a reputation for canceling contracts at the first sign of poor management. During lunch, Mary sought out Kathy, one of the assistants in the sales department. Kathy had always been friendly with her, and they occasionally did small favors for each other. "Kathy, do you know where Mr. Hamilton will be meeting the Germans on Friday?" "In the conference room on the top floor." "Why, Mary?" "It's about that task he gave me. Do you think I could take a look at the room before the meeting?" Kathy agreed to help and took Mary to see the space. It was a large room with a big table and leather chairs. There was a projector, a whiteboard, and a panoramic view of the city. Mary observed every detail, imagining how the meeting would unfold. She noticed that the chair arrangement wasn't ideal for an effective presentation, and that the lighting could be improved to highlight the documents. By the end of the second day, she had prepared a revised version of the proposal, fixing the issues she'd identified and including practical solutions for each. She'd also put together a short report on Innotech's successes and failures in other countries. As she was leaving the office, She ran into Richard in the elevator. He looked at her with curiosity and a hint of irritation. "Still playing businesswoman, Mary?" "I'm working on the proposal, Mr. Hamilton." "I hope you're not wasting your time. The Germans are serious people. They won't tolerate amateur work." "I understand, sir. Don't worry, I'll do my best." Richard stepped out of the elevator, shaking his head, clearly thinking he was wasting his time on this ridiculous situation. Mary continued her journey home, determined to make the most of every minute she had left. On the third day, she arrived at the company with a clear plan. She'd spent the night rehearsing her presentation and organizing all the documents clearly and concisely. She knew she'd only get one chance and couldn't afford to waste it. That morning, she approached employees from different departments to confirm details about operational costs and internal processes. Everyone was surprised by her technical and detailed questions, but cooperated because they knew her as an honest, hard-working person. Around 2 in the afternoon, Klaus Schmidt and 2 other German executives arrived at the company. Mary watched from a distance as they were greeted by Richard and his team. Klaus was a tall man with blonde hair and a serious expression, examining everything around him with attention to detail. The meeting was scheduled for 3 o'clock. Mary spent the last few moments reviewing her notes and trying to calm her nerves. Betty approached her in the break room. "Mary, there's still time to back out. No one will blame you for trying." "No, Betty, if I give up now, I'll never be able to look at myself in the mirror again." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. At exactly 3 o'clock, Mary knocked on the meeting room door. Richard answered with an annoyed expression. "Mary, what are you doing here? The meeting has already started." "Mr. Hamilton, you gave me 3 days to come up with a solution. I have a proposal to present." Klaus Schmidt looked up from the documents he was reviewing and watched the scene with curiosity. He had noticed the tension in the room since his arrival and sensed that something wasn't going well with the negotiations. "Who is this woman?" Klaus asked in English. Richard hesitated for a moment, clearly embarrassed. "She's an employee of the company. She had a minor issue with the documents and I'd like to hear what she has to say," Klaus interrupted, surprising everyone. Mary took a deep breath and stepped into the room. She placed her papers on the table and looked directly at Klaus. "Mr. Schmidt, my name is Mary Grace Sullivan. I've worked at this company for 15 years and had the chance to review the contract proposal very carefully. I've identified some points that could be improved to ensure the partnership's success." Klaus leaned forward, intrigued. The other Germans exchanged curious glances. Richard was visibly uncomfortable with the situation, but couldn't interrupt without causing a scene. "Please, go on," Klaus said. Mary opened her notebook and began presenting her observations. She spoke about the underestimated operational costs, citing specific examples from the company itself. She explained the logistical issues that could arise in expanding to other cities, drawing from her experience, observing the challenges the company had faced in previous projects. Then she mentioned the case of Mexico, where Innotech had encountered similar difficulties. Klaus looked visibly surprised. That information hadn't been shared with the American team. "How did you know about Mexico?" he asked. "I researched your company's history, Mr. Schmidt. I believe understanding past successes and challenges helps us plan better for the future." Klaus smiled for the first time since his arrival. He spent the next 20 minutes asking Mary technical questions, which she answered with confidence and practical knowledge. She demonstrated an understanding not just of the contract numbers, but also the real operational implications of implementation. Richard watched the scene with a mix of shock and admiration. He had never seen the custodian speak so authoritatively about complex business matters. The other German executives took notes and whispered comments to each other in German. "Mrs. Sullivan," Klaus finally said, "your observations are very insightful. May I ask about your academic background?" Mary hesitated for a moment. Then she decided to be completely honest. "I don't have a college degree, Mr. Schmidt, but I have 15 years of experience observing how this company operates in practice. I know every process, every challenge, every real expense, and I know that numbers on paper don't always match operational reality." Klaus exchanged a few words in German with his colleagues. Then he turned to Richard. "Mr. Hamilton, we need to talk about this proposal. Mrs. Mary's observations raise important issues that haven't been properly addressed." Richard tried to downplay the situation. "Mr. Schmidt, these are just comments from an employee with no experience in international business. Our technical team has already analyzed all these aspects." "With all due respect," Klaus interrupted, "but your inexperienced employee identified the exact same problems that caused us difficulties in Mexico. If you don't have clear plans to handle these issues, perhaps we'll need to reconsider our partnership." The silence in the room was tense. Mary realized she had created a delicate situation and decided to step in. "Mr. Schmidt, if I may, I've prepared some practical suggestions to resolve these issues." She opened another section of her notebook and began presenting detailed solutions for each problem identified. She proposed a cost monitoring system based on her experience with the cleaning supplies budget. She suggested a gradual training plan that took into account the reality of American employees. And she presented a regional expansion strategy that considered the logistical specifics of each city. Klaus was impressed by the practicality and realism of the proposed solutions. They were simple ideas, but grounded in real, hands-on knowledge, not academic theories. "Very interesting," he remarked. "May I ask how long it took you to prepare this analysis?" 3 days, Mr. Schmidt." 3 days? Klaus looked at Richard in surprise. "Your team took 3 months to prepare the original proposal, and one employee solved the main problems in 3 days." Richard was red with embarrassment. He tried to explain the circumstances, but Klaus cut him off. "Mr. Hamilton, I'd like to propose postponing this meeting. We need to revise our proposal based on these observations, and I'd like Mrs. Mary to be part of that revision." "Excuse me?" Richard asked, incredulous. "Your employee demonstrated a practical understanding of the operational challenges our company needs to consider. We want to work with partners who grasp reality, not just those who present pretty numbers on paper." Mary felt her legs tremble. She hadn't expected her intervention to have such a significant impact. Richard looked at her with an expression mixing anger, surprise, and something else she couldn't quite place. "Mr. Schmidt," Richard said, trying to regain control of the situation, "I'm sure we can revise the proposal without needing to involve—" "Mr. Hamilton," Klaus interrupted firmly, "either we include Mrs. Mary in the proposal revision, or we consider ending negotiations here. My company values partners who recognize and leverage talent, wherever it may be." Klaus's ultimatum echoed through the room like thunder. Richard realized he had no choice. Either he accepted Mary's participation in the revision, or he'd lose the biggest contract in his company's history. "Very well," he said, his voice tight. "Mary can join the revision." Klaus smiled and extended his hand to Mary. "Mrs. Mary, it will be a pleasure working with you. Can we meet tomorrow to discuss the details?" Mary shook the German executive's hand, still not quite believing what was happening. "Yes, Mr. Schmidt, I'll be here." After the Germans left, Richard remained in the room with Mary. The silence was heavy and charged with tension. Finally, he turned to her. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I tried to save the contract, like you asked me to." "You humiliated me in front of the most important clients we've ever had." Mary looked him straight in the eye without flinching. "Mr. Hamilton, I only did what was necessary to show that this contract can work. You challenged me, and I accepted the challenge." Richard paced the room, running his hands through his hair. He was clearly frustrated and confused by the situation. "Do you really believe you can work with German executives? You're a janitor, Mary. You have no education, no experience." "Maybe I don't have a formal education, Mr. Hamilton, but I have 15 years of experience in this company. I know how things really work, not just how they're supposed to on paper." She paused before continuing. "And you promised $25 million if I could save the deal. Are you going to keep your word?" Richard was speechless. He had made that promise as a cruel joke, never imagining Mary could actually influence the negotiations so dramatically. We'll see how things unfold," he replied evasively. Mary nodded and left the room, knowing the real battle was just beginning. That evening, she told Ryan about the day's events. Her son listened with growing admiration. "Mom, I always knew you were special, but I never imagined you could do something like this." "Neither did I, son. But sometimes life puts us in situations where we discover abilities we didn't even know we had." The next day, Mary arrived at the company wearing her best outfit, a white blouse and navy blue skirt she only wore on special occasions. She knew it would be a day unlike any other in her professional life. Klaus Schmidt arrived promptly at 9, accompanied by 2 American consultants he had hired overnight to assist in reviewing the proposal. Richard greeted them with forced politeness, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Where is Mrs. Mary?" asked Klaus. She must be cleaning the office," Richard replied, embarrassed. "Mr. Hamilton, as of today, Mrs. Mary will no longer be responsible for cleaning. She will be our special consultant for this project." Richard swallowed hard. Klaus continued, "And we expect her to be properly compensated for her work. We're talking about specialized consulting, not a favor." For the next 4 hours, Mary worked side by side with the German consultants, refining every aspect of the proposal. Her ability to identify practical problems and propose viable solutions impressed everyone. She suggested adjustments to the implementation schedule that accounted for American holidays and local cultural specifics. She proposed a communication system between the German and American teams that would be more efficient than originally planned. And she spotted cost-saving opportunities no one else had noticed. Klaus was so impressed that, during lunch, he made a surprising offer. "Mrs. Mary, my company would like to offer you a permanent position as an operations consultant for Latin America. You would work with us on all expansion projects in the region." Mary nearly choked on her sandwich. "Mr. Schmidt, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to answer now. Think about it. But I want you to know that people with your practical insight are incredibly valuable in the business world." When they returned for the afternoon meeting, Richard was visibly nervous. He had spent lunch trying to understand how he had lost control of the situation so completely. "Mr. Hamilton," Klaus said, "our team has finalized the proposal review. With the modifications suggested by Mrs. Mary, we're ready to sign the contract." Richard tried to smile, but his expression betrayed a mix of relief and resentment. "Excellent, Mr. Schmidt. When can we formalize the agreement?" "There's just one condition," Klaus said. "Mrs. Mary must be officially appointed as the project's implementation manager on the American side. Without her, we have no interest in moving forward." The silence in the room was deafening. Richard looked at Mary, then at Klaus, trying to process what he had just heard. "Mr. Schmidt, with all due respect, Mrs. Sullivan has no executive experience." "Mr. Hamilton," Klaus interrupted firmly. "In the last 2 days, Mrs. Sullivan has shown more practical competence than many executives I've worked with. She understands operations, she understands people, and she understands business. This is our final condition." Richard realized he was cornered. Either he accepted Klaus's demand, or he would lose the contract that would save his company from an impending financial crisis. "All right," he said reluctantly. "Mary will be assigned to the position." Klaus smiled and turned to Mary. "Mrs. Sullivan, do you accept the role?" Mary looked around the room. Every eye was fixed on her, waiting for her answer. This was the moment that would change her life forever. "Yes, Mr. Schmidt, I accept." The Germans applauded, and even some of the American executives in the room seemed genuinely impressed. Richard forced a smile and extended his hand to Mary. "Congratulations, Mary. You surprised us." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. But the real surprise was yet to come. Klaus asked to speak privately with Richard and Mary. "There's something I need to share with you," he said once they were alone. Innotech was about to cancel this contract. The original proposal had so many issues that our board had lost confidence in the American company's ability to properly implement our system. Richard paled. "What? But you never mentioned that." "We didn't, because we wanted to give it one last chance. And thankfully we did. because Mrs. Sullivan's intervention saved this deal. Klaus turned to Mary. Mrs. Sullivan, you literally saved a $25 million contract. And more than that, you've opened the door to a partnership that could be worth hundreds of millions in the coming years. Mary felt tears forming in her eyes. In 3 days, she had gone from a janitor to an executive, from invisible to indispensable. Mr. Schmidt, I just did what I thought was right. And that's exactly what made all the difference, Klaus replied. After Klaus left, Richard was alone with Mary. The silence between them was heavy, weighed down by years of disdain on one side and silent dedication on the other. Mary, he finally said, I owe you an apology. You don't have to, Mr. Hamilton. Yes, I do. I treated you as if you were invisible for years, and now I find out you might be the most valuable employee in this company. Mary looked at him with compassion. She could see he was genuinely remorseful, but she also sensed there was more behind his attitude. Mr. Hamilton, may I ask why you always treated me with such disdain? Richard hesitated, then sighed deeply. Because you reminded me of my own mother. Mary was surprised by the answer. Your mother? My mother worked as a maid for years to put me through school. I was always ashamed of it, always wanted to forget my humble beginnings. When I see you, I remember where I came from, and it unsettles me. Mary felt a wave of understanding. Finally, she grasped the anger and disdain Richard had shown her. Mr. Hamilton, there's nothing wrong with coming from a humble family. Your mother must have been a very strong woman to give you an education. She was, he said, his voice breaking, and I never properly acknowledged it. She passed away 5 years ago, and I never got the chance to tell her I was proud of what she did for me. Mary stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. It's not too late to honor her memory, Mr. Hamilton. You can do that by treating people with respect, no matter their position. Richard looked at her with tears in his eyes. You're right, Mary, and I'll start by keeping my promise. The $25 million is yours. Mary shook her head. Mr. Hamilton, I don't want the $25 million. What do you mean? You held up your end of the deal. I want something far more valuable than money, said Mary. I want you to create an education fund for employees' children. $25 million can pay for hundreds of young people just like you who have potential but lack opportunities. Richard was moved by the proposal. Mary, that's a wonderful idea. And I want the fund to be managed by a committee of employees from every level of the company, not just executives, but people like me who understand the real needs of working families. It'll be done exactly as you suggested. In the months that followed, Mary's transformation was gradual but profound. She adapted quickly to her executive responsibilities, while always staying humble and connected to employees at every level. The project with Innotech was an extraordinary success. Implementation stayed on schedule and within budget, exceeding all expectations. Mary became a role model in the company, known for solving complex problems with practical, human-centered solutions. Klaus Schmidt kept his offer to hire her as an international consultant, and Mary split her time between the United States and other countries in Latin America, helping Innotech expand its business in the region. But the biggest change happened in Richard's company culture. Inspired by Mary's example, he implemented policies that valued every employee regardless of rank. The Education Fund became one of the company's most successful programs. Within 2 years, it had already helped over 100 families, giving talented young people access to quality education. Mary never forgot her roots. Even as an executive, she made a point of meeting every employee personally and understanding their needs and aspirations. Ryan, her son, earned a scholarship to university through his own merit. He always said he was inspired by his mother's courage and determination. "Mom, you taught me it doesn't matter where we come from, only where we're going," he said during his engineering graduation ceremony. A year after the contract with the Germans, Richard's company won the Best Workplace Award for the state of New York. During the ceremony, Richard made sure to credit the success to the cultural shift led by Mary. "I've learned that a company's true value isn't in its equipment or contracts, but in its people," he said in his speech. "And leadership isn't measured by position, but by the ability to inspire and transform lives. Mary, sitting in the audience, was moved by Richard's words. She had seen a sincere change in him, driven by recognizing his own biases and a genuine desire to improve. Klaus Schmidt, who had become a close friend, visited the United States regularly to oversee projects. During one visit, he made an observation that perfectly captured Mary's journey. "Mrs. Sullivan, you didn't just save a contract. You proved talent and wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places, and that one determined person can transform an entire organization." Mary's story spread throughout the corporate world in the United States, becoming an example of how a person's worth should not be measured by their position in the hierarchy, but by their ability to contribute and grow. Companies across the country began implementing programs similar to the education fund Mary had created, recognizing that investing in people's development was the best strategy for sustainable success. Mary continued working as an executive but never completely abandoned her roots. Once a week, she still cleaned Richard Hamilton's office, not out of obligation but as a reminder to both of them that humility and respect are values that should never be forgotten. "Why do you still do this, Mary?" Richard once asked. "Because it reminds me of where I came from and helps me never forget that everyone deserves respect, no matter what job they do," she replied. 2 years after the life-changing incident, Mary was invited to speak at universities and corporate events about leadership and human value. Her presentations were always deeply moving because she spoke with the authority of someone who had lived the transformations she preached. During one of these talks, a young student asked what the most important moment of her journey had been. "It was when I realized I had worth," Mary answered. "For years, I saw myself only as a janitor, someone invisible and unimportant. But when I was challenged to prove my value, I discovered I had knowledge, insights, and abilities I didn't even know I possessed." The audience fell silent, absorbing the depth of that simple yet powerful answer. "What I've learned," Mary continued, "is that everyone has unique and valuable potential. Sometimes we just need an opportunity to show what we're capable of." After the talk, many people approached Mary to share their own stories of overcoming challenges and transformation. She listened to each one with care and attention, offering words of encouragement and practical wisdom. Richard, who had been in the audience, approached her at the end of the event. "Mary, do you have any idea of the impact you're having on people's lives?" "I'm just sharing what I've learned, Mr. Hamilton. If it helps someone believe in themselves more, then it's worth it." "You know what impresses me most about you," he said. "It's that even after achieving so much success, you're still the same humble, generous person you've always been." Mary smiled. "Success shouldn't change who we are, Mr. Hamilton. It should just give us more opportunities to help others." On the 3rd anniversary of the contract with Innotech, the company held a grand celebration. The project had expanded to 12 countries in Latin America and became the most successful in the German company's history in the region. During the party, Klaus Schmidt made a special toast in Mary's honor. 3 years ago, a janitor changed the course of our companies and our lives. She taught us that true innovation doesn't come just from technology, but from the ability to see and value human potential wherever it exists. The audience applauded warmly. Mary was moved to see so many people touched by her story and inspired by her journey. Betty, her former cleaning colleague and now supervisor of the Employee Development Program, approached her. "Mary, do you remember what you said that day when Mr. Hamilton challenged you?" "I remember saying I couldn't stand being treated as invisible anymore." "Exactly. And look how things have changed. Now you're one of the most respected and admired people in the company." "And you know what's most important, Betty," Mary said. "Now no employee in this company is treated as invisible. Everyone knows they have worth and potential." As the party was winding down, Richard approached Mary with an envelope in his hand. "Mary, I have something for you." She opened the envelope and found an official document. It was the deed to a small house in the neighborhood where she lived, purchased with funds from the education foundation she had created. "Mr. Hamilton, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. It's a recognition of what you've done for this company and all the families who've benefited from the education fund. Besides, The house will serve as the headquarters for the community center you've always dreamed of creating." Mary hugged Richard with tears in her eyes. It was the fulfillment of a dream she had carried in her heart for years, to have a place where she could offer courses and opportunities to people in situations similar to what she had once faced. In the following months, the community center became a reality. Mary offered professional training courses, adult literacy classes, and career guidance for those seeking new opportunities. The project caught the attention of other companies and social organizations, which began providing financial support and offering jobs to the program's graduates. Ryan, who had earned his engineering degree, decided to work part-time at the community center, developing tech education programs for local youth. "Mum, I learned from you that success only has meaning when it's shared," he said. One day, while organizing documents in her executive office, Mary found the old notebook where she had first taken notes about the German contract. She flipped through the pages fondly, remembering the anxiety and determination she had felt during those 3 life-changing days. Betty walked in just then. "What are you thinking about, Mary?" "I was thinking about how strange fate can be. If I hadn't spilled that coffee, none of this would have happened." "Maybe you spilled it for a reason," Betty said with a smile. "Sometimes the universe conspires to give us the opportunities we need." "Maybe, but I know the opportunity itself wasn't what mattered. It was what I did with it." That evening, Mary walked home through her neighborhood. She greeted neighbors, chatted with shopkeepers, and watched children playing in the square. Despite all the changes in her professional life, this was still the place where she truly felt at home. When she arrived, she found Ryan studying for a civil service exam. He had decided to pursue a career in public service to contribute to social policies on a larger scale. "How was your day, Mom?" "It was good, son. Sometimes I stop and think about everything that's happened, and I still can't quite believe it. You deserved all of this and more. You've always been a special person. You just needed a chance to show the world." Mary sat beside her son and picked up a book she was reading about people management. Even as an executive, she never stopped learning. "You know what makes me proudest in all of this, Ryan?" "What, Mom?" "Knowing that other people are getting opportunities because of what we've built. Every young person who gets an education through the foundation, every person who gains skills at the community center, every employee who feels valued at the company, that's what really matters." Ryan smiled, once again admiring his mother's wisdom and generosity. "You've always known that real success lies in lifting others up." "I learned it firsthand, son. When Mr. Hamilton humiliated me that day, I could have held on to resentment. But I chose to turn that pain into motivation to prove my worth. And when I succeeded, I chose to use my success to help others prove theirs too." In the following years, Mary's story became a case study in business schools across the country. Professors used her as an example of authentic leadership and how diverse experiences can enrich organizations. Innotech expanded its operations in Latin America beyond all expectations. Klaus Schmidt credited the success to the Mary mindset, as he called the approach that prioritized practical knowledge and valuing people. Richard transformed his company into one of the most admired in the United States in terms of people management. He often shared Mary's story in speeches and interviews, always emphasizing how she had changed not only the company, but also him personally. "Mary taught me that humility and competence aren't opposites," he would say. "In fact, it's humility that allows us to keep learning and growing, no matter the position we hold." The education fund Mary created had already benefited over 500 families. Many of the young people who were able to study through the program returned as volunteers, creating a virtuous cycle of opportunities and social transformation. The community center had also grown and now offered various programs, from literacy classes to technical courses in partnership with local businesses. Mary oversaw everything personally, always with the same care and attention to detail she had shown when reviewing the German contract. One Saturday morning, while at the community center advising a group of women who wanted to start small businesses, Mary received an unexpected call. It was from a journalist at a national TV program who wanted to do a story about her life. Mary hesitated to accept, as she had always preferred working quietly without seeking public recognition. "Mrs. Sullivan," the journalist said, "your story could inspire millions of people who feel invisible in their jobs. Don't you think you have a responsibility to share this experience?" Mary thought for a moment. She had always believed her role was to do the work, not talk about it. But maybe the journalist was right about the inspirational power of her story. "All right," she finally said, "but on one condition. I want the story to also highlight the work we're doing here at the community center and the impact of the education fund. It's not about me. It's about the opportunities we're creating for others." The segment aired 3 weeks later and had an extraordinary response. The show received thousands of messages from viewers sharing their own stories of perseverance and asking for advice on finding professional growth opportunities. Mary was moved by the messages, especially those from women who saw themselves in her journey. Many were domestic workers, caretakers, cleaners, and other professionals who felt undervalued in their jobs. Inspired by the public's reaction, Mary decided to write a book telling her story and sharing the lessons she had learned. She wanted it to be a practical guide for people looking to transform their professional lives, regardless of their background or current position. The book was written in simple, straightforward language, free of academic jargon or complex theories. Mary drew from her own experience and the stories of people she had met along her journey. It's Never Too Late to Discover Your Worth became a surprising bestseller. More important than sales was the impact it had on readers' lives. Mary received letters and messages from people who had found the courage to pursue new opportunities after reading her story. One letter that touched her deeply was from a 60-year-old woman who had decided to return to school after reading the book. She wrote, "Mrs. Mary, you showed me that age isn't an obstacle to dreaming and growing. I'm taking a technical course and already got a better job. Thank you for reminding me that I have worth." During the book launch, Mary met Amy Patterson, a young journalist who had grown up in a low-income family and managed to graduate in communications while working as a housekeeper during college. "Mrs. Mary, your story gave me strength to keep going when everything seemed impossible," said Amy. "Whenever I felt discouraged, I remembered you and how you faced that challenge." Mary hugged the young woman, moved to see how her experience had touched so many lives in different ways. "Amy, what matters is that you never doubted your worth, even when others did. That's what makes all the difference." The conversation with Amy made Mary reflect on the legacy she was building. It wasn't just about her own transformation, but how a story of courage and determination could inspire others to believe in their own potential. 5 years after the episode that changed her life, Mary was invited to receive an honor at the New York City Council for the social work she had developed. During the ceremony, she looked into the audience and saw familiar faces: Richard, Klaus Schmidt, Betty, Ryan, Amy Patterson, and dozens of others whose lives had been touched by her story. In her acceptance speech, Mary spoke about the importance of recognizing each person's worth and creating opportunities for everyone to show their potential. "No job is small when it's done with dignity," she said, "and no person is without worth when we look at them with respect and care. My story isn't special because I'm special. It's special because it shows that everyone has unique abilities that deserve to be recognized and nurtured." After the ceremony, Richard approached her. "Mary, do you have any idea how many lives you changed with your actions that day?" "Mr. Hamilton, I just did what I thought was right. The rest was a natural consequence." "That's exactly your strength, Mary. You always do what you believe is right, no matter the circumstances or others' expectations." That night, as she organized the gifts and certificates she had received, Mary thought about how unpredictable life was. 5 years ago, she had been an invisible janitor. Now she was a respected executive, best-selling author, and a reference in human development. But what made her proudest wasn't the titles or recognition. It was knowing she had started a movement of transformation that would keep growing even without her presence. The education fund was sustainable. The community center had a life of its own, and the company culture had permanently changed. Ryan, who now worked as a social policy analyst for the state government, came home that night with exciting news. "Mom, the governor approved a bill based on our education fund model. It'll be implemented in companies across the state. Mary smiled, touched. It was confirmation that her story had gone beyond the walls of one company and was now influencing public policies that would benefit thousands of families. That's wonderful, son. How many people will get opportunities because of this? We estimate at least 10,000 young people a year, and the best part is the project also includes training and recognition programs for employees at all levels, just like you always advocated. Mary was moved to see her simple, practical ideas turning into policies that would promote social justice on a large scale. The following Sunday, Mary was at the community center preparing materials for the week's classes when she received an unexpected visit. It was Mrs. Constance, a 70-year-old woman who had been her neighbor when she was a child. "Mary, my dear, I saw you on TV and couldn't believe it. Remember when we played school in my backyard and you always said you wanted to help people study?" Mary hugged Mrs. Constance, moved by the childhood memory. "I do remember, Mrs. Constance. You always said I had a knack for teaching. And I was right, wasn't I? Look at what you've accomplished. Your mother, God rest her soul, would be so proud." The two talked for hours, reminiscing about the past and discussing Mary's future projects. Mrs. Constance shared that she had gone back to school at 68, inspired by the news story about Mary. "You gave me the courage to chase an old dream, dear. I finished high school last year, and now I'm taking a crafts course. I want to open my own little shop." Mary was touched to see how her story had inspired even those who had known her since childhood to pursue new challenges and opportunities. When Mrs. Constance left, Mary reflected on the cycles of life and how our actions can echo through time in unexpected ways. She had planted a seed of courage and determination that was sprouting in places and people she never imagined. The following Monday, Mary was in her office when she received a call from Klaus Schmidt, who was in Germany. "Mary, I have a proposal for you. Innotech is expanding into Africa and Asia, and we'd like you to lead our global human development strategy." Mary was surprised by the offer. It was an extraordinary opportunity, but it would also mean spending long periods away from the United States and the projects she had built. "Klaus, that's a very generous offer, but I need to think. My life and work are here." "I completely understand, Mary, but consider this. You could bring your human-centered approach to other cultures and countries. Imagine the global impact that could have." After hanging up, Mary discussed the proposal with Ryan. He encouraged her to accept. "Mum, you've always taught me that we should use our talents to help as many people as possible. This is a chance to positively influence thousands of lives around the world." Mary decided to accept, but with conditions. She would work part-time on the international project and part-time in the United States, ensuring she could still oversee local programs. "Klaus, I'll accept as long as I can keep my commitments here, and I want some of what we learn abroad to strengthen our local projects." "Perfect, Mary. That's exactly the approach we hoped for." Over the next 2 years, Mary traveled to 12 countries, implementing human development and employee empowerment programs. In each place, she adapted her ideas to local cultures, always prioritizing respect for people and recognizing their unique potential. In Ghana, she helped create a program to identify talent among employees with different educational backgrounds. In Vietnam, she developed a mentorship system connecting experienced executives with young workers. In India, she implemented diversity policies that valued different backgrounds and experiences. Every international project brought new insights that Mary applied back home. The community center incorporated popular education techniques she had learned in Africa. The Education Fund adopted financial sustainability models she had seen in Asia. During one of her trips, Mary received a message that moved her deeply. It was about a cleaning employee at a company in Kenya who had been promoted to supervisor after demonstrating her organizational and leadership skills. "Thank you for showing the world that people like me have value and potential. Your story gave me the courage to speak up and show what I'm capable of." Mary realized her story had become universal, touching people from different cultures and backgrounds who identified with her experience of invisibility and transformation. When she returned to the United States after this series of international trips, Mary found her local projects stronger than ever. The education fund had become self-sustaining and was benefiting over 1,000 families a year. The community center had expanded to 3 locations in different neighborhoods. Richard, who had become one of the country's most respected businessmen in terms of social responsibility, welcomed her with a surprise. The company had created the Mary Grace Foundation, dedicated exclusively to developing human empowerment programs. "Mary, we want you to lead the foundation and use our resources to expand your projects to other cities and states." Mary was moved by the offer. It was the opportunity to systematize and scale up everything she had learned and developed over the years. "Richard, I accept with great pleasure, but I want the foundation to be independent and work with companies of all sizes, not just yours." "Exactly what we hoped you'd say," Richard smiled. The Mary Grace Foundation was launched 6 months later with a clear mission: to identify, develop, and empower human talent, regardless of education, background, or position. The foundation offered consulting services for businesses, training courses for workers, and community education programs. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of Mary Grace's story and where you're following us from. Do you believe everyone has the potential to transform like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments.